You're right, it's a Monday. And you're also right, we've never published anything on a Monday before, but today is different. Today we're celebrating the fact that 10 cryptograms just went live in the Cryptograms and Coffee newsletter series. And some people are new to cryptograms, and others are just kind of warming up cryptograms after some time away from them. So I thought it would be a good chance for us to take a quick look back over those 10 cryptograms and see what we can learn from them. After doing that, I've come up with 5 lessons that we're going to be talking about here. There's many more techniques that we have to solve cryptograms, and we'll get to those eventually, I'm sure. But for today, we're just going to focus in on what we've seen already in those first 10 puzzles. Tip number 1. Look for your single letter words. In English, there's only 2 letters that can fit into a single letter word, and that's A and I. Statistically, they're about the same in terms of usage, so it can be really tricky to see which is which. You have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. A word of caution, though, about those single letter word spots. Make sure you actually have a single letter word. It's possible you might be tricked by an initial or something that is a single letter abbreviation, for example. Tip number 2. This is apostrophes and understanding how they work. We haven't seen all of the cases around apostrophes yet in these first 10 puzzles. The ones that we've seen are the easier ones, the more common ones. For example, we have an S, the possessive S after an apostrophe, very common. The other option is a T. If there's a T there, the letter prior to the apostrophe is going to be an N. In general, you'll see more possessive S's than you will T's. Tip number 3. This is about patterns. Patterns that help us get into puzzles that might otherwise be difficult to get into. We're talking about puzzles that have no single letter word but do have patterns that we can use. And a pattern is basically using the frequencies that we'd expect to see in typical English to figure out what words are. 3-letter words in particular are great candidates for this because the very most commonly used word in the English language is the word the. And we can identify that because the very first letter and the last letter of this word are very commonly used letters. And the one in the middle, not so much. So if you see a pattern with a high use letter, a not so much used letter, and another high use letter, that's probably going to be the word the. Another common 3-letter word is the word and that is a different pattern altogether. You start out with a very common word, the middle one is slightly less common than that. It's, and is still a very common letter, but not as much as A. And then D is not used as much. So you see this steady decrease as you move along with those letters. So a very common first letter, a less common second letter, and even less for the third. During this set of puzzles, we also saw how we can use patterns to identify the word that, T-H-A-T. The pattern itself is a lot like what we're looking for when we see the word the. We have a TH at the beginning of that, we have a TH at the beginning of the, we have a gap, 1 letter in the middle, and then we have that same letter repeating on the end. So the first and last letter will be the same. And the way I like to use this is as a quality check, I guess you could say. If I'm seeing a 3-letter word that might look like the word the, and I'm also seeing another word down further that might look like that, not just in the case of one word, but in the case of 2. So it can make you feel more confident. There were 8 puzzles out of the first 10 that featured the word the in it, and that we can use this pattern to identify. Similarly, there are 8 puzzles with the word and in it. So using a pattern, looking for the word the, looking for the word and, will help you get into the puzzle. Another interesting tip here is the use of a question mark. Now, we've only seen this in one of our puzzles. That tells us one important thing. Somewhere in this puzzle, if there's a question mark, there will be a question word, a who, what, why, when, or where. in this puzzle, and it can really help us focus in and solve, at least a 3-letter word or bigger. The last tip I have for you is to remember that this is a puzzle. It is going to be challenging. It's meant to be challenging. The joy is coming from the unraveling of the mystery, solving the puzzle and figuring out the answer. So don't expect to get everything right the first time, and also just get in and start making changes, because the longer you stare at a puzzle on paper or on the computer screen, the longer it's going to take you to solve the puzzle. It's a good idea just to go in and try something. Use some of the techniques that we've just talked about to try to get into this puzzle and solve it that way. Fully expect that you might have to go back and change things. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just how this works. So those are my top 5 tips from the first 10 cryptograms and the Cryptograms and Coffee newsletters. In the future, if you'd like to see videos like this one where we break things down and highlight specific skills that you can use to make things easier for you in the future, that's great. Let me know that you'd like to see content like this. Also, if you're not a newsletter subscriber, feel free to do that at our website. Links are in the YouTube descriptions. All of the puzzles that we played so far are here on YouTube too. So if you're not a member, you can play all the first 10 puzzles that we're looking at here. And have yourself a great day.